Welcome. This is another installment of What's Your Story? My name is Charley Timmins. We're here on RVNTV each week at 1:30 on Friday. My guest today is Dave Bookbinder. He deals in one of life's little mysteries, business valuation. And as you will come to appreciate today, he does it in a distinctly different way. Dave serves as the Senior Director of Pine Hill Valuation Services. In this region, he's earned a reputation as a collaborative consultant. Working with client companies of all sizes, Dave provides financial advisory services for strategic planning purposes. When working closely with his clients, Dave has a gift for creating relationships that add value for the long term. In the process, Dave addresses a well-accepted business axiom: you can't manage what you can't measure. While business performance is measured by the numbers, Dave's clients say he offers more. Dave, welcome.
Wow, thanks,
What's
Charley.
Your Story?
Thank you so much for having me. Great introduction. Really appreciate that. Kind words.
I know you a little bit. I've done my homework. So what we try to do on this particular show is try to be as authentic and real as possible. That's why you're here. I need you to tell the audience exactly what they need to know about you, what you do, and the value you can deliver.
Will do.
So I've been a fan for many years. Dave is a thought leader in his profession. So I'm excited for my audience to get some of the insights that you can offer that explain to them how you're distinctly different. So let's start there. What does make you different?
Oh, that's a great question to start with. So I guess that's a combination of a couple of things. My background is not just in valuation consulting. I guess there's a lot of folks that come out of school and are just in that space. I've had the wonderful opportunities to be both inside of companies and also be involved in transactions in the investment banking world. So I've got I guess I'll call it a bigger picture view necessarily of the valuation world as opposed to just more of an academic perspective. But clients have told me that my perspective is different from others that they may have worked with from the standpoint that I ask better questions. Some have said to me that I got the sense you cared more. And frankly, my favorite is when they say, I really can't explain it, it was just different. Because that means it's not really happening here, it was just a different experience for them.
They had a different experience with you.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's what I've been told.
All right. What about some of the other things that I found in my research about tangible valuations, intangible valuations? I'm not too sure about that. What's that all about?
Okay, so I am involved in business and intangible valuation. So the tangible assets are machinery and equipment, and oftentimes it's real estate as well.
That's what I'm familiar with mostly, yeah.
So there are folks who specialize in the appraisal of real estate and in machinery. I'm in the business valuation, intangible asset, financial instruments camp, if you will.
So give me an example.
So let's say a company buys another business, and they've purchased machinery, equipment, real estate, and then a whole host of other intangibles. We'll partner with another group to help value those tangible assets, but my team and I will delve into the valuation of the intangibles, for example.
Is that what you mean by holistic?
No, I think from a holistic perspective, I think what you may be alluding to is at Pine Hill, we've got basically three legs of a corporate finance stool. So there's technical accounting, which is accounting advisory. There's transaction advisory, and then there's the valuation advisory services. So because valuations are typically driven by some type of a transactional event, it's great to have the resources of colleagues who are really smart in those other areas.
So it seemed to me that when you're engaged with a client, you're wearing a lot of different hats.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you're a psychologist too.
So what word would you use best to describe that role that you play when you're engaged with a client?
I'm going to start by telling you the word that I hate. That is vendor. I've said many times, you can almost call me anything, but please don't call me a vendor. I feel that's degrading. I like to think of myself as an advisor, as a peer and a partner in working with my clients.
A mutual colleague shared something with me when I was doing my research. They're talking about you, always strive to exceed your client's expectations, and that you realize it's about relationships, not projects. but I thought they engaged you for a project. So what,
Yeah,
explain that.
It's kind of an evolution of thinking, Charlie. Early in my career, I was involved in a lot of projects. For example, there may have been a time where a prospective client would call and say, I'm thinking of selling my business, I need a valuation. And we might just jump right in, value the business, hand them the report, and essentially tell them have a nice life. Years later, I started to understand that that really wasn't adding value to the client, for example, and I started to ask some additional questions, started to draw from my other background and experience in M&A. And yes, there are certainly times where if a client is thinking of selling a business, valuation is appropriate, I can add a ton of value, we can help them tremendously. But a lot of times, it's not the case. A lot of times clients are in a circumstance where they may have to sell, they have the oh no moment, edited for television. And in that time, they now have to do a transaction. The gun's almost to their head for whatever reason. Maybe it's a death in the family, maybe it's a succession issue, there's not a kid that's going to rise up into the business, what have you. And they need to be in transaction mode. So a lot of times a theoretical valuation for me at that particular moment, while nice, doesn't necessarily help them. So I wound up starting to ask those kinds of questions and made introductions to try and help the client really get what they need.
A lot of people in my audience are not finance people, they're not M&A people. So can you give us a quick little story before we go to break that sort of typifies what you just shared with us?
Typifies what I just shared. Okay, so here's a great story for you. A company down in the DC area needed a valuation of a foreign currency swap. I won't get into the technicals of that, but they needed a financial instrument valued. They had a valuation person because they were doing things that necessitated it, but their valuation person didn't have the skills or experience to value this particular thing. I was introduced to them. It really wasn't a big deal for us, so we helped them. They met their deadline. They were thrilled, and we wound up charging them $1,000 for that engagement. And why did I charge them $1,000? I didn't want to charge them anything. They insisted that they at least pay something. So they wanted to formalize it, memorialize it in an engagement letter. So now I have to upstream an engagement letter for a $1,000 project. But here's the good news. That little project turned into a wonderful client. They were a repeat client of ours for several years. And that $1,000 was, I can promise you, multiplied by many. So
That reminds me about giving to get. And I know that you're big on that particular philosophy. So we're going to go to break. Now a word from our sponsors. We'll be back shortly with Dave Bookbinder.
You see the sign.
When I needed to jumpstart sales.
Build attendance for an event.
Help people find their way. Fast Signs designed new directional signage.
And got them back on track. Get started at fastsigns.com.
Hey everyone, this is Donna Valente, sales performance and leadership coach and founder of the Enterprise Sales Institute. Join me every Wednesday at 11 o'clock here with RVNTV on That Sales Show. On this show, we are going to share with you best practices in emotional intelligence, sales process, and sales strategy with some of the industry's biggest thought leaders. So, don't forget, 11 o'clock Wednesday here with RVNTV and That Sales Show.
Got a quarter?
Welcome back. I'm here with my guest, Dave Bookbinder. Dave deals in one of life's little mysteries, business valuation. Dave, in researching you for the show, I'm going to read here for a minute. I realized that you didn't transition into valuation. A lot of people reach a crossroads in their career and they decide, what else am I going to do? You've been around this thing for a while. You really didn't pivot into it. Could you share with the audience your journey?
Yeah, after I got my MBA, I was working at the IRS at night, not in taxes, I was doing budget and reports. I knew I wanted to do something in the business world that I could utilize my master's degree, and found an ad on a job board at Drexel University where I was going to grad school, for a valuation analyst, and the position description talked about a lot of the things that we were learning in MBA school, and it just sounded really interesting. So threw my hat in the ring, interviewed, and got that position, started to learn valuation in kind of the real world context. But when you talk about pivoting, I did actually leave valuation. I was still involved in valuation, but involved inside companies and involved in valuation also from an M&A perspective in the investment banking world. So taking on additional corporate finance responsibilities beyond just valuation. But so if there was a pivot, it was a pivot back to valuation, because that's the thing that I really enjoyed most.
I noticed that you have some acronyms after your name. Could you explain those to our audience?
Yeah.
Because
So
I think credentials do matter in your business. I mean, if you're giving somebody a valuation on their business, you're liable. So you better be good, you better be accurate.
Yeah.
You know your stuff, but explain those credentials, if you will.
Yeah, so I've got credentials, ASA, which stands for Accredited Senior Appraiser, and CEIV, which is Certified in Entity and Intangible Valuation, both of them issued by the American Society of Appraisers. There's a number of designations in the valuation community. It's literally like alphabet soup. So to your point, the CEIV designation is a relatively new one, and it came together by a group of different credentialing agencies inspired by the SEC because of the variability of the quality of product that they were seeing from valuation analysts and valuation experts when they're working in matters of fair value and publicly traded companies or companies that are complying with GAAP financial reporting.
So it sounds to me that it was a customer-oriented or a client-oriented action on their part to make sure that providers of these services met sort of minimum requirements.
Yeah, the idea there is that hopefully at some point it's going to be a requirement if you're going to be in that space that you have that type of credential. And clients who are working with experts should be looking toward that designation to understand that the people they're working with have the skills and practical experience and are qualified to do that kind of work.
I can appreciate that. The field I'm in, it's very, very similar. I get the sense you really like what you do. You guys know how you do it. So I'm going to get to the obvious one that is always on my mind.
Okay.
Why do you do this? What is your purpose? What's your big why, if you will, behind you and doing this work?
So throughout my career, I've been frustrated by the fact that people believe that valuation services is nothing more than a commodity. So when my accounting friends and legal friends are watching this, they can empathize. We're all perceived to be a commodity. And in my world, because it's a referral-based business, the people that give out referrals generally provide 3 names. And when a prospective client is looking at the 3 names, sometimes it's hard to differentiate and understand why the 3 are different, and they default to price. And as you well know, if you're talking to a painter or a car mechanic or somebody like that, if you get 3 bids and one of them is the real low one, instinctively you know something's not right. But in my world, because the referrals came from another trusted advisor, if the price is low, that's usually a decision point. So to get to your question, my why, every day when I get out of bed, I'm trying to change the way valuation services are perceived and sold.
So give me an example. How do you do that? Because you're dealing with a mindset that says this is a commodity,
Right.
and price should drive it, and you're suggesting something different. So share a story where that's evident.
Yeah, so the best way I can describe it is kind of taking a role out of the Seinfeld series when George Costanza has the aha moment about doing the opposite. George's life completely turns around. You know, he's a single bald-headed guy living at home, and suddenly he gets
out of work.
a pretty girlfriend, right?
He's out of work.
So it's not about being a vendor. It's not about thinking about transactions. It's about thinking about client first all the time. It's about building long-term relationships. And if you behave in a manner that's consistent with that as a philosophy, I think everything else just happens and falls right into place. So that's what I try to do.
So give us an example. Give us something tangible to take away from this segment.
Okay. Former client of mine was very acquisitive. They typically would hand out one valuation to each of 3 or 4 firms on a rotating basis. I was curious as to why that was, so we had lunch together one day, and I asked him about that. And he said, oh, we just like to rotate our vendors. So he used the V word, right? So already this is not good. And I explained to him that there's a benefit if you are working with a single partner. And I understand you want to have a fallback in case somebody stubs their toe. I totally get that. But I helped him understand the value of a relationship and working together collaboratively, because if you're thinking about things from a big picture perspective, you can educate a client. You can give them insights into how this deal fits in with the last deal, things that they can use as they're thinking about their next deal, because it's all connected. And you lose that if you're dealing with, dare I say, multiple vendors. So he said, you know what, I never realized that I could actually do that. How do we make that happen? And we put together a document to memorialize this relationship, and it was great from there.
How successful are you in rewiring the minds of other potential clients?
That's a great question. And to be perfectly candid with you, Charlie, it's tough. It really is. It takes time. Not everyone buys into that. There's still that mindset that it's a commodity and I'm only going to buy based on price. And as Simon Sinek might say, that's probably not a good fit client, right? But the ones where the message resonates, we wind up working together for a long time.
Well, sometimes it makes sense to say no and to walk away. At this point, we're going to walk away for a few minutes, let our sponsors have a few words, and we'll come back because you have an announcement to make, and I want to share it with everybody. Thank you. We'll be back in a moment.
When did you see the sun?
When I needed to jumpstart sales.
Build attendance for an event.
Help people find their way. Fast Signs designed new directional signage.
And got them back on track. Get started at fastsigns.com.
Welcome to Live Better Longer, the show for baby boomers who want to improve and even extend their retirement years. I'm your host, Bill Borton. On Live Better Longer, our viewers meet and learn from a wide variety of experts and thought leaders who share their knowledge on subjects ranging from portfolio management to nutrition management, from insurance, Social Security, and reverse mortgages, to annuities, Medicare, and Roth IRA conversions. Not just thought-provoking and actionable information, but why it's important to you. Tune in every Tuesday at 11 on RVNTV for reliable and unbiased information from experts in their field who are committed to helping you live better longer.
Welcome back to What's Your Story? Today, Dave Bookbinder is with me telling us his story, and hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about the story behind his story. I'm going to start this segment, Dave, by reading you a quote.
Okay.
Because I'd like you to talk about this a little bit, because in doing my research, my understanding is this quote is triggering a lot of thinking worldwide. So I'll read it out for the audience. The value of a business is a function of how well the financial capital and the intellectual capital are managed by the human capital. And you better get the human capital part right.
Yeah.
Dave, what's it all mean?
Well, as you know, I wrote a book not too long ago, and in trying to figure out how to succinctly describe the message of the book.
Just happen to have a copy here, Dave.
There you go. That's actually a new cover, brand new artwork, same message, but new art. Trying to figure out a way to succinctly capture what the book entails. What's it about? And in thinking about how a business is constructed, I started thinking, oh, there's financial capital assets, there's intellectual capital, there's human capital. And then it just fell out that those words, and I started to put them in articles that made it into the book. And what I'm continually amazed to find is that this quote, as you said, has been shared literally around the world. Sometimes I'm tagged in it, other times it just turns up, a Google alert or something like that, and I'm amazed to see where it's happened. But I try to build a long thread on my Twitter feed. It's the top post that's pinned there, where you may be able to get a flavor for some of the countries where this quote has actually wound up. It's just mind-boggling to me.
That must be very, very satisfying. We talked about your purpose before. Why do you do the work that you do? And this is a whole different area. Earlier, we also talked about what value you deliver. How can this play into the type of work you do for clients? How can this help them?
Well, it's about perspective. It's about taking a big picture view. Unfortunately, I'm hamstrung right now by my industry's methodologies in terms of how we in the valuation profession value human capital and how the accounting profession recognizes human capital. The reality is that people don't wind up on a financial statement.
But assets go down the elevator at night. Those human assets go out the door at night. If they don't come back, the business is hurt.
Absolutely. And sometimes if they come back and they've got a really bad attitude, the business is hurt.
Listen, 70% of the people that went to work this morning wish they were going to a different building on Monday. It's just a reality.
Absolutely.
So when companies have those assets and are positive and they are aligned with the purpose of the company, you don't want to lose them. They're worth something.
They
So
are.
in an acquisition situation, I would imagine the acquiring company wants to hold on to those assets as much as possible.
They do. And I'll be honest with you, I have worked with some clients who have retained me specifically because of the message of the book, even though they recognize that the math, if you will, around the value of human capital is going to be what it's going to be formulaically, but they enjoyed the philosophy and they shared the philosophy, so there was a lot of mind share around those concepts.
I believe the audience resonates with this kind of a message. Can you share with us any story about where a client has really embraced this idea and it's helped to maybe transform or help them make changes inside their organization?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a whole host of research that I've uncovered in going through the book and the journey, but I'll tell you one. My friend Andy Levin over here at MHS Lift is a case study in the book, and he is just a phenomenal story about a company that got intentional about building a positive corporate culture, and they've seen tremendous results as a result of that. Safety improved, attendance improved, engagement improved, profitability improved, revenues improved. They've won awards, and in talking with Andy, he'll tell you that it's all about the culture that they employ at that group. And
This is a very forward-thinking concept because companies are squeezing every penny they can from productivity and from tangible resources, that if they can somehow get a better handle on what their people are worth to them, that's going to help them in the long run when they do business.
Yeah.
Especially when companies look at, especially if they're a publicly traded company, how strong is their workforce? How enlightened, how engaged are they? That has to impact the pricing a certain way.
Yeah, and we talk about it in the book, as you well know, that there's been some petitions to the SEC for more disclosure requirements around human capital, the investment in people. And you're also seeing it with folks like the CEO of BlackRock, who's told his investors that we need to be more socially conscious in our investing. It's all connected.
He said what?
Need to be more socially conscious in our investing.
Larry Fink said that to whom?
To his CEO constituents.
Now that's a change. That's a sea shift.
Yeah.
If he's moving in that direction. So
Yeah.
it just reinforces what you're saying in the book.
Yeah, which is why I think if you've got smart money making all these kinds of noises about this issue, I'm optimistically of the view that it's going to change, and at some point you're going to see human capital in a financial statement.
Listen, we're coming to the end of our time together. I wish we had more. But one of the things I think the audience got out of this is you go beyond the numbers. You dig down and you find things out about your client that uncovers their great story, and there are lessons that we all can learn from that. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some of this. What can we do for you, Dave? Turn to our audience and let them know what you can do for them, besides buying the book, which is obvious. But what is it that you're looking for from our audience?
Yeah, I'm always happy to have a conversation with a business owner, a CEO, a CFO, an accountant, an attorney, any other trusted advisor who's working with a client company, whether they're growing, whether they've got challenges. There's probably some mind share that myself and my colleagues could provide that'll be helpful to both the person who makes that introduction as well as that prospective client.
Do you do speaking engagements? Do you get in front of groups, industry groups, or local?
Yeah, speaking is definitely an activity we're happy to do as well.
So if any of you out there know of a group that could benefit from this kind of thinking, take it upon yourself to reach out to Dave, try to help him get in front of that audience. That's a win-win-win for everybody. So Dave, I want to thank you for being on What's Your Story today.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week at 1:30 East here on RVNTV, and you'll hear about someone's story. Thank you for joining What's Your Story. Have a great weekend.